Thank you everyone for joining us. My name is Scott Malbaurn and I am the director of the Schneider Museum of Art, part of the Oregon Center for the Arts here at SOU. Please note that we have you all on mute, and please stay on mute until the end of the talk. If you have any questions, please type those into the chat or save them for the end of the talk. Today I have the pleasure of introducing our special guest, Nancy Baker Cahill, who is an artist we are highlighting in our upcoming outdoor exhibition and programming for Art Beyond. Art Beyond is an outdoor art adventure taking place in and around Ashland, Oregon from May 15th through July 18th, filled with site-specific installations from the top of Mount Ashland to the valley floor, including sites such as ScienceWorks Hands-On Museum, Willowit Ranch, Vesper Meadow, Mount Ashland, and Lithia Park. Please visit our website, sma.sou.edu, for more information. Nancy Baker Cahill is a new media artist who examines power, selfhood, and embodied consciousness through drawing and shared immersive space. She is the founder and artistic director of Fourth Wall, a free augmented reality AR art platform exploring resistance and inclusive creative expression. Her recent AR public art project, Liberty Bell, commissioned by Art Production Fund, earned features in the New York Times, Frieze magazine, Artnet, Smithsonian Magazine, and the Washington Post, among many other publications. The project on view through 2021 spans 6 historic and culturally significant sites along the Eastern Seaboard of the US and appeared in Artnews list, the defining public artworks of 2020. Baker Cahill was also included in Artnews' list of 2021 deciders. Her 2018 TED Talk, Augmented Reality as an Artist's Tool for Equity and Access, launched her international public speaking practice. She has since delivered keynotes at the 2019 Games for Change, the 2020 Augmented World Expo, and has spoken at the Hirshhorn Museum and numerous academic institutions and conferences. Baker Cahill is an artist scholar in the Berggruen Institute inaugural transformations of the Human Fellowship, and will be a summer artist resident at Oxy Arts and Coding Futures Residency, focused on AR monuments. She is the Art and Creative Technologies Advisor for the XRSI Safety Initiative and is a member of the Guild of Future Architects. In May 2021, she will receive the Williams College Bicentennial Medal of Honor. Please join me in welcoming Nancy Baker Cahill. Hi, Nancy, how are you?
Hi everyone. Thank you, Scott, so much for that introduction. I really appreciate it. I'm really excited to be here to talk to everyone today.
Well, we are so excited to be speaking to you. I've been having so much fun playing with the Fourth Wall app and playing with those AR artworks and our beautiful Southern Oregon scenery. I've made you a co-host, so you are able to share your screen and get into your presentation whenever you are ready.
Okay, awesome. And just, for the record, I would love to see some of those. If you've recorded any of that, I would love to see it. I'd love to see them in situ.
I'm going to get them started posting during the Art Beyond event.
Oh, awesome. Okay. So I will share my screen, and I'm just going to actually kill my video for a second. I'm very excited to talk to everyone today about using AR to change perspectives and reclaim space. You're looking at a gorgeous image by an artist here named Carolina Quesado, and this is part of the Defining Line AR art exhibition here in Los Angeles. But before I get into that, I just want to briefly give you a little background about how I work as an artist and what my practice really involves, which is a kind of intersection of some of the oldest technologies, I would call it, caveman technology, analog drawing on paper, and some of them are futuristic, such as VR, AR, what we've commonly referred to sometimes in the sort of catch basin phrase of extended reality, aka XR. And of course, there's an activist piece and thread that underlies and undergirds all of it, which I'll get into as well. But just to begin, drawing is really my first language and has always animated literally everything I do, whether it's on paper or in sculptural form or even in immersive installation. And, conceptually, what I'm really interested in is how we understand reality and experience reality through conscious sensory engagement. And so my goal in whatever way I iterate the work is really to examine and grapple with how embodied knowledge allows us to mediate and resist systems of oppression and control. And so, all the contradictions that are inherent in XR, invisibility and visibility, the real and the virtual, all of that kind of mirrors the push-pull of opposing forces within the body that I feel anyway, and that I've been kind of exploring for a long time, and hopefully challenge understandings of consciousness. I will say that, when I look back at my work, I've been trying to work in immersive media for longer than I have been able to. So, that's what the immersive installations are about. That's what my videos were about. But it wasn't until I did this drawing on the left that I really started to entertain the idea of pushing into a media that I hadn't before. And the drawing that you see on the left is from a series I did called Surds, which is based on a book by Susan Bryson, who's a feminist philosopher. And it's about the way that trauma actually lives in the body. And based on reactions of viewers to these works, I realized that I really wanted to amplify their effect, their visceral effect. And I really wanted to put people inside the drawings, which is when I first started working in VR. But also prior to that, and certainly in lockstep with that, I had the great privilege and fortune to initiate a collaborative project at a place called Homeboy Industries here in Los Angeles. And Homeboy Industries is this exceptional organization that provides job training and all kinds of services for formerly incarcerated and gang-involved individuals. And we did this incredible collaborative project called Exit Wounds, where people at Homeboy told their stories through the very democratic medium of collage, and then told me where to, I had separately developed a series called Bullet Blossoms, also sort of performative in the sense that they involved my body, they involved this idea of puncturing space and these sort of artificial the wall of the drawing, to examine basically the impact of violence, but violence coexisting with hope, violence coexisting with despair. I mean, not coexisting with despair coexisting with hope, and the also intoxicating effects of violence in this culture. But anyway, so we combined those two, we combined their stories with my series, and these were the net results. And this ended up being a very foundational and formative moment for me as an artist. It remains one of the most important projects I've ever done. And I'll describe later how this informs the work that I do now. Also, just to get back to the connective tissue between drawing on paper and drawing in VR, this is a video capture of my very first VR drawing. And I've always been sort of interested in capturing these moments of quiet cataclysm. And you can see the way that drawing on paper in a very sort of abstract but direct and simple way has, after months and now years of drawing in VR, completely changed the way I represent space, mass, velocity. It's just been a very transformative experience. And I would say that the very first drawing I did in VR was my attempt to really put you again inside the drawing and to give the viewer some kind of agency and choice in terms of how they moved in and through the experience, which isn't something we get to do, when we're encountering a sculpture, let's say, in real life. So I had the great opportunity to show these works, these VR drawings, as public art on billboards on the Sunset Strip in 2018. And it was an amazing, amazing thing. They looked particularly immersive at night more than anything. And it started to dawn on me that, wow, we had an opportunity here to really challenge what could be public art. And because the barrier to entry for VR, was and actually truly remains pretty high. You need obviously access to electricity, to Wi-Fi, to the hardware itself. I went back to my technical team at Drive Studios and I said, how could we make this more available to a bigger, broader audience? And that was when the Fourth Wall app that Scott mentioned was born. And this was in February of 2018. And, AR is this, of course, there are always going to be issues of accessibility in terms of, access to smartphones, access to tablets, which versions of those or generations of those phones or tablets actually support AR software. But by and large, it's if you have Snapchat, if you have any of these things, it's it's a more accessible medium, I would say, and vector for experiencing this work than almost anything else I could. Wow. Beginning was giving the viewer access through a portal into the artist studio. I think sometimes artist studios are treated as these, sacred spaces, which they are, but there's also a kind of intimacy to inviting someone in and to see the connection between the drawing on paper and the drawing, in virtual drawing. We also wanted to make it super accessible to anyone who is anyway not impaired, but unable to move in a certain way. Like, we didn't want to assume that people were walking, so we wanted to make it as accessible as possible. So we created a teleport function so that you could really experience it anywhere you were and from any position. There was also a hologram of me, a volumetric capture, as we say, talking about the conceptual underpinnings of the work. We have since abandoned those in the app because it's taken on such a bigger life of its own. But in the original iteration, we took my VR drawings, translated them into AR, and offered them as a kind of opening to a conversation. And people all over the world took these quote unquote assets or artworks and created their own context and content for the work, which was and remains incredibly exhilarating. I mean, I just love how, this whole process has harnessed people's imaginations in ways that none of us could ever have anticipated. People use them artistically, humorously, to occupy their children. This is my favorite of all time. Someone put one of the drawings on the baggage carousel at LA. Love that. The AR drawing will track to its base, and if it's locked onto that, it's going to travel with it. And that also happened on the LA River, which is so beautiful. But a really transitional and another kind of light bulb foundational moment happened when my friend Tanya Aganiga, who's a brilliant artist and an activist, does a lot of work at the border here in California, took the app into Mexico, into Tijuana, and put one of the drawings in the United States and pulled it through the border wall into Mexico. And I want to just show you what this looks like. It was a really profound moment for me because I realized, wow, this could be used for something even more intentional, even more specific to a site. And I have to give her enormous credit for basically prompting this entire new tack that we took with the app. So I went back to my team and I said, well, what could we do with this? How could we amplify other artists' voices? How could I collaborate with other artists and really engage this question of sight, of exploding sort of out of the walls of the gallery, because originally I really wanted to challenge this idea that, and back to inclusive storytelling and Homeboy, and what are the barriers to entry? Who are the gatekeepers, and how can we really explode that and invite people into conversations about art and where art is situated in the world, and leave it to them, what was meaningful to them, and ask that question and listen. So this basically birthed Coordinates, which is a whole platform within the app wherein we host and curate AR public art exhibitions by collaborating with other artists. So I've been really lucky. I'll show you just a few examples. I've been lucky to co-curate some of them. I've been lucky to host the things I haven't. And it's been a really vibrant part of the app and really thought-provoking for me in terms of, the potential of AR, its incredible power based on where it is in the world and what people are doing with it. So I made myself the earliest guinea pig. I was thinking a lot about Civil War, and I wanted to do something around gun violence. And so I geolocated my very first piece called Hurt Colors which is a painting over the site of the 2017, I think it was 2017, massacre in Vegas. Because of we have this, it might have been 2018, forgive me, but this sort of fire hose of news. And I wanted to remember, and I wanted to use it as a tool of remembrance. I also had the opportunity when Justice Kavanaugh was being confirmed to revisit the series I mentioned before, the Surd series, and geolocate a piece in front of the, above the protest in front of the Supreme Court and add the word unprotected because, of course, as of today, that was a commentary on sexual violence and sexual assault in general, but also a nod to the fact that the ERA remains unratified. So we are literally unprotected. We are unprotected and we are not protected equally under the law. But the great joy was really in collaborating with other artists. And I'm going to have to speed through this a little bit because I realize we're short on time, but I'm just going to give you a few examples of what other artists did. Tanya, again, Aganiga did an extraordinary piece called Impotence Incarnate over the border wall. And I've experienced it in person even a month ago. This was actually the first piece we geolocated, and it just took my breath away. There's nothing more powerful than standing in the immersive space of shared space, of smelling the air, hearing the ambient sounds, taking in the entirety of a scene with this added layer of content and meaning. Deborah Scacco over the Statue of Liberty, a piece about immigration. Kentura Davis over the pyramid in Gaza. Not Gaza, it's in Giza, sorry, not Gaza at all, in Egypt, the Great Pyramid, with a whole piece about simultaneity and identity. Beatriz Cortez did a beautiful call and response with a sculpture she'd created based on the Mayan calendrical system. And she really wanted to create an AR memorial to a Guatemalan immigrant who had been swimming across the Rio Grande in Nuevo Laredo, Mexico, into Texas, and was murdered by a Border Patrol guard. And she wanted to mark that moment, honor her memory, and also engage questions of simultaneity and time and coexistence and futures, speculative futures. Other examples of works we can scale up, take up space in a way that doesn't do any harm, isn't disruptive to the environment, and allows us to make commentary and to tell stories again that may be untold or unseen. The other piece I wanted to mention is sound, using sound with AR. I was invited to make a piece on surveillance, and this is a topic that is of great importance to me, and we can get into that later if anyone's interested, as it relates to XR technologies, but certainly as it relates to all technology. And so this is a piece I've actually geolocated all over the world now, but here it was in its earliest incarnation, and you can see how adding sound to this experience, even just to the simplest graphite drawing, has an impact. Pretty creepy. We can also be very nimble and guerrilla in our tactics. These are a couple of Trump rallies. I'm not going to play these right now, but we were able to geolocate these just for a few hours while he spoke and his words were broadcast into. Here in Los Angeles, again, you saw an early example of the Defining Line AR exhibition where we invited artists, local artists, to comment on parts of the river that addressed issues like immigration, gentrification, climate change, colonization. And we were very fortunate to work with Tongva artists as well, since we are on Tongva land right now. And I should have prefaced this by honoring that as well. So back, just to pivot briefly to process, I was invited to make some work for the Desert X Biennial in 2019, sorry. Gosh, the pandemic really messes with time. And so I created two pieces related to climate change in VR, and then we translated them into AR, and they became these massive land artworks that commented on also a call and response that were geolocated in very specific locations, one over the Salton Sea called Margin of Error, and I'm going to play it, show you what it looked like there. And then one called Revolutions over the wind turbines in Palm Springs, which eerily, as they turned, they would often mimic the exact pace of the wind turbines. So that was very surreal and immersive as well. And one thing I just want to say really quickly, and Scott, I don't know if this is something that you're going to experience in Portland, but what was really beautiful about the experience is how it really brought people together. And there were these very spontaneous gatherings of people where, someone would have forgotten their phone or didn't have access to Wi-Fi or whatever. And these impromptu conversations would erupt and people would share their content and do performative things. And it was just a very beautiful thing. It's not what I had expected of the technology. Battlegrounds is a recent 2018 exhibition that I co-curated with, also 2019, forgive me, with Jesse Damiani. And this was again, back to the idea of Civil War and monuments. Been thinking a lot about, what is a contested site? What is a contested space? And we were so fortunate to work with a series of incredible artists, 24 artists in New Orleans, who we basically asked them, look, what is a contested site to you? And the results were extraordinary. We have 30 artworks in the show. It's live. If you go to New Orleans, I urge you to go check it out. Here you see a piece by Nick Aziz about the link between the prison industrial complex and the fast food industry located outside the Orleans Parish Prison. Some of this content is so charged and so moving and so historically loaded that it's the first time AR has actually ever brought me to tears. These are all incredibly powerful artworks by extraordinary artists in New Orleans. Ana Hernandez on the left, Don Dideau in the center, Ron Theron on the right, again, using sound. Placing these pieces right in the middle. I mean, it just takes your breath away when you're standing there. And back to this idea of reclamation. Two of the artists we worked with extensively in the Lower Ninth Ward, Keith Calhoun and Chandra McCormack, really wanted to use AR to reclaim space, to reclaim histories. And this is a picture of a Holy Family church, spiritual church in the Lower Ninth Ward. It was central to the community prior to Hurricane Katrina. And this was a church with all woman identified leadership, and it was vilified by a lot of white churches as, for Black, they called it Black magic and voodoo, which of course it wasn't. It was an essential part of a community that didn't have access to, expensive therapy and other kinds of things. And so it was really crucial to them to honor the memory, but also to lay claim to it and to say this was here and this mattered. So community engagement is part of everything that we do, no matter where we are. That was something we did with Keith and Chandra in the Lower Ninth Ward. And then I'm gonna have to speed through this a little bit, but I was invited to create a site-specific piece by Facebook for their LA offices. And I had been thinking a lot about all the things, biometric data extraction, all the things that are taken from us and projected onto us. And not just that, but really just sort of culturally with social media, with all of it, and really underscoring the particulate nature of our bodies, that we ourselves are particulate. And so and the ways in which our lives are really mediated through lenses. So I created a series of drawings, and they're mixed media pieces, installed them on the wall. I wanted to put these, dancers, these moments of sort of ecstatic dance, abstracted bodies and moments of ecstatic dance, and put them in these lenses on the wall, and then create an AR intervention and interaction that allowed you to move down the wall, have experience those pieces, have them come off the walls to be developed in the drawing, and to reconsider your own body in the process. I'm really proud of that project, and I wish that people could see it. I don't know when they'll be able to. In tandem with that, I wanted to create a dancer that we scaled way up outside. It was important to me that it be, the figure of a woman, because it is such a male-dominated industry. This brings us to Liberty Bell, which Scott mentioned earlier. This is a project I'm so proud of. We started, I'm just gonna speed through this. These are some of my analog drawings. We were very, very intentional with where we placed this work. And, I was invited by the Art Production Fund to create a piece for Philadelphia, which is what you see. This is the top image you see. And I was thinking a lot about the Liberty Bell, because I experienced it a few times as a kid, and it made such a deep impression on me, the fact that it was cracked and that they kept this cracked bell. And I'd been thinking a lot about the idea of liberty and the fact that it was a very, a really challenging concept, that, as something that was sort of maybe cracked from the beginning, given the genocidal origins of our country, and given, the fact that we were, again, on the brink of a kind of cultural civil war. So I had no idea, of course, we had a pandemic coming, or that we were going to have all the civil unrest prompted by the murder of George Floyd. But I really had imagined it against the backdrop of all of this radical economic inequality and structural racism and police brutality and disinformation and voter suppression and climate change and QAnon and unchecked nationalism and all the things, biased algorithms, all the things that we were struggling with then and continue to struggle with. And so kind of opening this conversation up around liberty. Liberty, what does liberty even mean? And liberty in what context and for whom, who enjoys liberty today. And so, Liberty Bell, Selma, Alabama, to the Edmund Pettus Bridge. And again, sound was crucial to this project. I collaborated with an incredible artist named Ana Luisa Petrisco. And as this drawing, as this abstracted drawing of a red, white, and blue, threads of a bell start to sort of tear apart and pull together and swell and contract, the soundtrack becomes increasingly arrhythmic and aharmonious and unnerving, actually. It starts off sort of lulling, and then it becomes more chaotic. And so when we chose our locations, we chose them very intentionally and made sure that when we reached out to these communities that we really, we really listened to what would be meaningful to them as well. So we started in Boston. You see Boston on the right here, Philadelphia, Selma, the Rockaways above. We did a tandem climate change piece related to Liberty Bell because they were disproportionately hit during Hurricane Sandy. Charleston, site of the original Civil War, and of course, Washington, D.C. And they are available on the website. So I know I'm speeding through, but please, if you're at all interested or curious, go to fourthwallapp.org, where you can see all of them in their glory. Over the summer, I had an incredible, again, opportunity. I was approached by Alice Grace Stites, who's a brilliant curator in Louisville, to collaborate on an AR monument to Breonna Taylor. And the artist who created this monument is named Brianna Harlan, and she worked with spoken word poet Hannah Drake to create this beautiful monument. And they consulted with Breonna Taylor's family. It's called She Ascends, and it is currently geolocated in front of Metro Hall in Louisville. The soundtrack is incredible, but it is 2 minutes long, so I'm unfortunately going to have to speed past it here. But I encourage you all to experience it, because it's just incredibly powerful and a great honor to Breonna Taylor's memory. Again, 2 artists here in Los Angeles, brilliant artists. Castles and Rafa organized 80 artists over the summer to launch In Plain Sight, which was actually a skywriting performative intervention over hundreds of detention centers to call out the human rights violations of our immigration policies, but more importantly, our detention centers. And they wanted it to live on in AR. And so Fourth Wall actually hosted these skywriting messages, and they're still there today. These are all messages that other artists had created for the people who are being detained in these locations. And I love the piece by Zachary Drucker that says "Nosotros te vemos," which of course means we see you. I just thought that was a beautiful use of AR. Snap also approached me to create a lens for Snapchat, and I created this piece called Last Dance, and it's a commentary on climate change. And again, I'm kind of using the body as particulate to underscore that ephemerality and just how fragile and delicate life is. AR is the perfect medium for anything ephemeral, because of course it's an echo and a memory of that. I'm not going to get into this. That was an analog piece that I used to imagine this piece called Legacy. This was supposed to debut in South by Southwest, but in 2020, but of course the pandemic happened, and so it ended up happening. I made it first in AR and then in VR, and this is the VR, but which I'll show you in a second. But I met with people in Austin and asked, what are the main concerns of most of the people here? I mean, not that you could ever generalize like that, but the themes that kept coming up were gentrification and climate change. And of course, those two things are linked. So I created this piece called Legacy, and I really wanted to integrate, they have incredible, I think it might be the biggest bat population in the world or something. I mean, they have some like crazy bat population. So I really wanted to invoke the colors of their famous violet sunsets, and to create a piece that I hope is very powerful. And I'll play it for you now. Increasingly chaotic. More recently, I have moved into really playing with this idea of contested realities. What is real? What is not real? What is a simulation? What is an object? And what is memory? So I've been creating these sculptures that are made of my drawings, actually, on the far left, So these installations of 3D, essentially 3D drawings. And I've both been projecting onto them as I am here, using projection mapping actually, and trying to animate the forms in unexpected ways. And they do end up really kind of popping off the wall. It's almost like an inversion of AR. I've been thinking a lot, of course, about like, you know, shared space. How do we experience art if we can't, you know, when we're together, and how could I make work that doesn't require a headset again, or even a phone in this case? So that's what I've been sort of pushing into on that front. And then on the right, I've also been photogramming the work, putting it through some AI mutations, and then messing with it in a 3D modeling software to really kind of create uncanny reproductions of objects that don't exist in nature to begin with. So I'm kind of exploring more philosophical territory here, but again, trying in every case to make the work accessible as possible. And most recently, I was invited to be part of something called Luminex here in downtown LA. It was just about a month ago. And five artists were given massive, this is about 154 feet wide, massive city walls for one night to project onto. And I projected Hollow Point, which you saw earlier. And it was crazy. It was one of the most immersive. It was really, first of all, it was like one of the best public art experiences of my life, but we had 13,000 people come through. And the way that people interacted with this work was just astonishing to me. And apart from the just general exhilaration of being able to experience free art in, you know, shared immersive space outside on a night when many people had been vaccinated and many were wearing masks, it felt so communal, it felt so transformative. And because we were working at this scale, of course, it was like by definition immersive and powerful. So that was really profound. I'm almost done. I just wanted to say I'm super inspired, not only by, of course, the lived experience, but by a lot of what I read and watch and listen to. And I just wanted to share some of my favorite titles, movies, some of the bits of media that have been deeply, deeply influential to me in my work. And I think you have I think you have the dancer on your apps. These are my handles on Instagram. And again, for more information, you can always visit either of my websites. Thank you so much. I'm putting myself back on video and hopefully stop sharing.
Wow, Nancy, I didn't want you to stop.
Oh, I was very aware of the time. I'm sorry if I rushed through. There's so much to cover.
No, I'm really glad you at least had a little bit of opportunity to introduce these works, as I'm sure most of our audiences, for Art Beyond and our website, where we are really promoting the use of the Fourth Wall app. So that's been a major introduction for many of our audiences, and to get this glimpse of there's so much more there. So, it's very exciting work, I think very important work, and quite a future for this, not just the technology, but the use of these tools for content and meaning. Okay, enough for me right now. So we're going to take a little bit of time to open this up for questions. For those of you at home, if you have any questions, you can either type those into the chat and I will read them aloud for everybody, or you can unmute yourself and as well as use your video if you would like to ask Nancy any questions directly. I'll give that a little bit of time before I start asking questions.
Yeah, and forgive all my dates. It's so crazy. I do really feel like the pandemic has so disrupted a sense of, because 2020 was such a huge year, and yet sometimes it just feels utterly collapsed, and then I'm like, wait, when did that happen? And it's all happened so recently,
Yeah. Well, once again, if you have any questions, type them into the chat, or you can unmute yourself and share your video. If there's nothing, wait, here we go. I do, okay, right. Bye, Sherry.
Sherry.
Let's take a moment and maybe briefly talk about NFTs. So that is a major thing going on right now, and you've recently had a bit of an engagement with that. Would you like to address that for a couple of minutes?
Sure. Yeah, I'm actually involved in a couple of, one is a blockchain project, but the NFT that you're referring to is a piece that I developed and collaborated with an art lawyer, a museum, actually, the Houston, I'm sure you know, maybe you know Hesse, the Houston Contemporary Arts Museum, and the platform Snark Art, and the eco-friendly cryptocurrency Tezos. I don't know how familiar everyone is with NFTs, but they have been, there's been a kind of feverish attention devoted to them recently in the art world. And certainly there's been a pretty, I would characterize it as, I'm sure you would, Scott, kind of a gold rush mentality around it. And the truth about these things, it's both more simple and more complex than it appears. And I think for artists, it's an interesting conversation because, you know, so much of the time we don't enjoy the same accountability that other people do in other industries. You know, we don't have a guild, we don't have a union, and so oftentimes we don't have the ability to trace our work, to trace its provenance, to be paid royalties when it's resold and treated as a commodity, et cetera. So NFTs have a lot of promise in them, using the blockchain in this way. I think while it is there, there's a lot of potential and opportunity, and I see the beauty of that, and I see the potential. We can put the eco conversation to the side because I feel very powerfully that, at least as an artist, I'm not going to engage with platforms that rely on Ethereum. I think it's really important that we be mindful all the time of our impact. And, you know, it's not as though fiat transactions are eco-friendly at all, but here we have an opportunity to build something and to insist on something better. So that's what happened here. And I was delighted that Tezos signed on. But I called the piece Contract Killers because one of the things that comes along with NFTs is something called a smart contract. And in talking to my lawyer about it at length, it turns out that they're not smart at all. They're the opposite of smart. And so we wanted to craft a smarter contract, but even in imagining how to hold buyers, collectors accountable and to protect artists in the process, because of course someone can, you know, basically purchase an NFT on one platform and they're really not obligated to resell it on that platform. They can take it off chain. They can do any number of things where you will never actually reap any of the benefits of those. And furthermore, if you wanted to share your profits with someone, I'm sorry, I'm trying to say this quickly. There's so much, it's such a can of worms. If you wanted to share those profits, there's no built-in mechanism for you to do that. So what we really want to argue for is a more standardized contract that could be interoperable, that could be used between platforms. But for me as an artist, of course, I couldn't think about contracts or accountability and not consider the idea of social contracts and all the ways in which we have also failed to deliver on our social contracts to each other. So I created an AR piece of a dissolving handshake, an agreement that is never consummated, let's call it. And I put it in front of City Hall. I put it in front of the Hall of Justice to talk about the carceral state and system. Again, it's a big concern of mine. And over a pile of cash to really talk about, you know, the ravages of a late capitalist society. And so, yeah, so this is going to drop on Snark Art on May 18th. And we have some in real life objects attached to those, which buyers will receive if they participate. And I think it's going to be available both with fiat and with Tezos. But anyway, all of this, it's been profiled in the Art newspaper if you want to know more, and hopefully we'll get additional press. But it's been an interesting moment. I feel that to engage with these technologies, we always have to adopt a kind of a critical eye and, you know, approach them with a certain critique, because none of these technologies, while being very powerful tools, are neutral in any way. And so how can we use them to empower? How can we use them subversively? How can we use them for good?
Yeah. Thank you, Nancy. Before I ask my next question, just another moment, if anybody at home has a question for Nancy. Okay, so my question, Nancy, so we're just talking about NFTs, you know, sort of like this new thing that's happening today, the platform for digital artists. Let's go back before you even got into digital art, you know, working analog, working on drawings, you know, being that artist, you know, we have some, you know, undergraduate students viewing this, and more will come, you know, putting yourself back into those shoes. what kind of risk or chance were you taking, or what kind of experiment jumping into digital world, and what has that done for you? Like the idea of like chance and risk and using time to investigate something else. Can you talk a little bit about that, those early years as an artist and then going into a new platform?
Definitely. When I was an undergraduate, I basically worked in two media, drawing and video. So I've always had one foot in sort of a more techie arena. But when I graduated, I took a lot of time off. I had really sort of lost my way creatively, and I ended up, spending all my time. I was a mother. I am a mother. I didn't stop being a mother, but I really, I didn't pursue my practice at all until I had my third child. And at that moment I was like, well, I got a lot of catching up to do. So I think because I didn't have a traditional path and I didn't go to art school and I didn't have any of that sort of built-in support, it kind of gave me a certain freedom. And I felt like, well, if I want to do something, I'm just going to have to figure it out and either seek help from someone who can help me do it, or just be unorthodox and pick up the tools and see what I can do. And so that's sort of how I began, was, with some of my, I taught myself how to basically airbrush and spray paint. And so I did a whole series there, and nobody taught me how to do it. I just kind of figured it out. And I feel like, in some ways it's really smart. Like if you're learning certain softwares, really good to learn the tutorials, but there's also so much freedom and innovation that's possible when you actually don't know the rules and you come up against a roadblock. And that's certainly what happened with VR. I started drawing using a really, really accessible and intuitive tool called Tilt Brush. I'm sure some of you have used it. It's awesome and exhilarating. You're drawing in 360, but like you're looking at these tools and they're not the tools for traditional artists. They're for animators, they're for illustrators. And so like, that was like immediately frustrating for me. And so, you figure it out. You're like, okay, how do I strip it of this? How do I invest it with this? How do I use it in this way? Like, and you just sort it out. And I think as long as like your North Star is whatever is driving you conceptually, then you're going to take as many or as few risks as it requires, and really consider the materiality and how it supports and informs and embodies that content. So I guess that's what I would say, but I'm like, I came at everything so circuitously, and I still, I have an inherent curiosity in a sense of like, well, I didn't put in that time then, so I'm putting it in now. And as a result, I work all the time. And, but it's never boring. And I think also acknowledging when you don't have expertise in an area, but you want to get into it, the collaborative, like, I just feel like we're in this beautiful collaborative moment where, people come together and produce really two or more brains are often much better than one. And that's a little bit what my TED Talk is also about. This myth of the lone genius artist is a fallacy, in my opinion.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Nancy. That is so important. Of a discourse and conversation, to have the idea of communication, collaboration, interdisciplinary practices, experimentation. Artists are so rooted in creativity and problem solving, and experimenting with materials and finding ways to get into that, once again, that content and meaning. Once again, I'm gonna give before my next comment, a chance for anybody else at home to unmute and ask or to have a question.
Hi.
Tori? Hey,
Yeah.
Tori.
Question.
Yeah. First of all, that talk was incredible. I was actually getting my COVID shot during it.
Perfect.
Yeah. I thank you for talking about how you like took time off after school. I've kind of like taken a long time in my education, and I'm finally kind of like getting into art more and allowing myself to do that. In this year of COVID, actually. So I'm like really, really missing collaboration. And I like this idea of just this idea of like VR and everything and having that accessible, because it is, I think, incredibly accessible, especially in this time. It's just like, it's so exciting. I'm so excited to check it out. Yeah, I think I lost my question in all of that, but I'm glad to hear that you kind of found your way back to something that like means so much. I have been exploring a lot of drawing lately, and I miss collaboration, and I miss like having like a conversation and making it just more than something that's on a piece of paper. That was just incredible. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. That's such a great comment, and I agree with you. And I think that like I think part of what made 2020 bearable for me anyway was, were these collaborations that are possible across the country or across the world, that we could even briefly, come together toward a common goal is honestly, in a time that's really challenging, it reinvests the work with a kind of hope and purpose that I think we all need, not just for our own survival, but collectively as as a larger community and creative community, because that's a beautiful thing. And as for like time off, I beat myself up for a long time for not kind of following a traditional path. And now I realize, I had a meeting with a curator once, and I was sort of apologizing for my work, and I was saying, I took all this time off to be a mother and to do the things. And I was like, and so this has nothing to do with, but that has nothing to do with this work. And she looked at me, because the work was really fraught, like really like gutsy and visceral. And she was like, you're absolutely wrong. She was like, it has everything to do with it. And that's why it's powerful, and it was like a turning moment for me, because I was like, oh, like I hadn't seen it as part of my own infrastructure and my own sort of like conceptual grist that I was working with. So, there's all the stuff we bring with us from our childhood, from what we take in atmospherically in the world. And then there are just the things that inform our work from how we live and how we process it. So it's all valuable. And whenever it comes out, you can't stop it from coming out anyway, because when it does, like, it's coming. So, you kind of have to get out of the way. You gotta be like, all right, it's here.
Those are great words, Nancy. Thank you. Thank you, Tori. I have a question in the chat. What was the budget for the art projected on the large wall? What is the timeline in building out a project like that? How long did it take to complete the project?
That was a fantastic question. It was a very generous budget. I think it was somewhere around, might have been around $40,000, maybe more. I'm sure they wouldn't love to have me spilling the details like this, but I'm all for transparency. And the timeline, we didn't have a lot of time. We actually, part of what was, I sometimes think having a collapsed timeline can be great, because it can really force you to get into it. Sometimes it's too collapsed, and that's a problem, but this was just about right. I think we had about 4 months total, start to finish, from the moment I came up with the idea for the time of execution. But it was a multi-part project, because it was the drawings on the wall, and then it was working with my team to map those exactly, to trigger an AR experience, to build the AR experience so that it was coherent and non-repeating and all these other things. So it was quite an undertaking. It was quite an ambitious project. It's actually, I'm very proud of that work. That kind of budget allowed me to really innovate in that moment. So,
yeah, thank you, Nancy.
Well, if you're asking on behalf of a City Arts Commission, double that.
Yeah,
artists should be paid more.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to get in a quick pitch here for everybody at home. Once again, if you have a smartphone or tablet, to download the free app, Fourth Wall, in which you can engage with Nancy's VR works. And as soon as you start playing with it, you will be excited about the possibilities. And then this world of creativity and collaboration and working with partners and setting things up, it can really turn into a collaboration with Nancy, utilizing her AR works and contexts that you enjoy and like, and working with others. So we are asking people to get to Lithia Park. We have this beautiful park here in Ashland, Oregon, full of so much beautiful sites, and to engage with those works and then post them to Instagram and hashtag ArtBeyond2021 and geotag Lithia Park. And feel free to tag Nancy and Fourth Wall. And then at the end of Art Beyond, shortly after July 18th, we'll ask Nancy if she has any sort of favorite images or videos from that, and we will give out some complimentary Schneider Museum of Art gear, like our sweatshirts, to those who participated. With that, any last comments or questions from anybody? Nancy?
Can I just add one thing? Super, super crucial detail. Please make sure you allow all permissions. I don't collect any user data, so you don't have to worry about that for a second. But if you need to allow permission, I think to location services, the mic, and the photos, and that way everything you record will be stored directly into your photos folder, so that you have access to that content.
Okay, thank you for saying that. Yeah, I'm sure many people would say no to that.
Yeah, no, I of course I would too. But it does require that to work.
Thank you so much. Last chance for anybody at home. Any questions for Nancy? Okay, well, I will end it with Nancy, thank you so much for your time. It is greatly appreciated. I'm looking forward to see what our audiences can do with the Fourth Wall app, and looking forward to your new work and upcoming work as well.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you everyone for being here. It was a true pleasure.